and welcome. My name is Piers Ridyard, CEO of RDX Works, a core developer of the decentralized finance protocol Radix, a public ledger entirely focused on bringing DeFi into the mainstream. This is the Radix roundtable from all of the people from RDX Works. We've got our chief strategy officer, Adam, here. We have our chief marketing officer, Jeremy, here. We have our chief product officer, Matt, here, and our chief technology officer, Russell. And today we are, as per usual, we're going to be answering questions from the community. This is more long form. It happens roughly once a month. And it's for the kind of questions that we get asked that we can't just answer in like a one-line answer on Telegram or something like that, and gives us a chance for the team to have a bit of a discussion. So,
is this the first time we've had all five of us on the call?
Is this the first time we've had all five of us?
It feels like there's always
one
dropout. So. Was another one? Okay, well, anyway, this is still an illustrious one.
But it's,
now, this is the first time the video editor is going to be like, how do I do this?
Right.
And Jared, did you wear that shirt specifically, or is that a coincidence that you have the roundtable shirt?
Oh, know, it's funny. I was going to wear one of our competitors' shirts just to stick it to Piers again, but then I could see that not playing well, so I thought I'd go with something a little bit more neutral, but I thought the Polygon shirt would have been epic. So, when you're the CMO, you have to think about the competition and get in their head, so I have to channel it. You're welcome.
Exactly. Okay, so number one. Question by Rock Howard. For the health of the ecosystem, it would be cool if the various NFT marketplaces and leading NFT art projects could look into possible NFT standards for Babylon. Would you guys like to lead such a discussion, or should we coordinate that ourselves? So this is just to give you guys who haven't looked into it, there's actually quite a burgeoning NFT and NFT marketplace community in Radix already. Some really cool projects in there. And that growth has been really surprising, even in the early days of the Radix ledger and Scrypto. And so Rock is kind of saying, look, when Babylon goes live, there's going to be this new way of creating NFTs that didn't exist before on things like Ethereum. Should we think about organizing and getting some kind of standards together before that? So let's start with Matt on that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. It's something we have been thinking about quite a bit. I mean, I think one very concrete way of thinking about it is like, why do you need standards? Well, the reason why you need a standard is because you would like to have a wallet or a dashboard that can sort of visualize NFTs and present information about NFTs in a standard way, which means you need to have some standard of what it should be looking for, because you don't want to have this arbitrary set of data that every different web page is sort of having to figure, for this NFT, I'm looking for the image here, and I've got these pieces of information. So these standards are very important. It's a good question, because I think I want to be upfront. Like, this is kind of part of our overall wallet messaging we've been talking about, is that we are, in the background, we're working on a very, very new wallet design for Babylon. And so part of that is very tightly tied to these standards. And that basically the wallet we release is going to be the first implementation of adopting some standards around these things. Because obviously our wallet's going to need to have some expectations around, if you want things to show up in a certain way in the wallet, here's what you should do. You can do whatever you want, but it's going to show up more nicely if you do it this way for our wallet. So we are kind of taking it as our responsibility to take the first cut at some of these standards. It won't be the be all and end all, and this is something that we're going to want to open up to the community, but kind of going along with everything we're doing at the wallet, it's so intertwined with what we're doing on the network side and on the Scrypto side and the wallet side that it's going to happen really late in the game. And so probably those standards it might not even make beta net. It might be like we're talking about these standards shortly before mainnet, which I realize is going to be a little bit disappointing for people, but it is something that we definitely want to take the first cut at putting some basic standards out there, not just for NFTs either, basic tokens too. Like, for example, how you do symbols, how do you do descriptions and names and icons and that kind of stuff. All of that for any type of resource, we need some standards, and we're taking it as our responsibility to take the first cut at those things. And then we'll kind of open this up to a little bit more sort of a community process of some kind of like, how do we expand these standards along with additions to the wallet to make use of them.
Yeah, I sort of see this as like, go on, Russell.
I was just going to say, you could also think of it as, if we get to a point where we're confident that we feel at least partial, we're part of the standard we feel comfortable with, we'll talk about it right away at that point. Don't think of it as like, oh, hey, there's just going to be this sudden announcement at the last possible moment. But I think if you're the question of should we drive it or would you guys like to, that's something that we prefer to drive it for sure. But we'll, as soon as we have information we can speak confidently about, we will.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think there definitely will be some form of this we can get out much earlier than betanet or mainnet. It's just that, we're actually, some of this was even discussed earlier today. So there's some interesting stuff going on. Yeah.
What is I think that the thing that is important to highlight here, and it sort of goes into what Matt is saying, which is that like in building the full stack for DeFi, we have actually done a lot of thinking over the entire stack. And so this first cut at the standards is not us saying this is always going to come from, RDX Works or any of the sort of Radix entities, but that there's a bunch of thinking that we kind of need to put out in a framework and let people like understand how that fits into a much bigger, broader picture of how we expect user interactions to look and how we expect like people to understand what they're dealing with and all this kind of stuff. And so it's a starting point. And absolutely from then you can riff. But I think that the first really important thing is just getting everyone up the curve with all of the full stack thinking that we've got there, so that people don't miss sort of like some of the beauty that can be created as a result of having all of those tools work together.
Yeah, and it's a really good point also that, we absolutely have the intention of, for example, these two things are very tightly, the standards and the wallet presentation are very closely linked, but we fully expect that after Babylon launch and exciting things start happening in the ecosystem, we expect there will be emergent standards that will just happen. It'll be just like, hey, as it turns out, everybody is issuing this kind of asset in this particular way because there's this piece of data they want. This is something that we want to embrace. We'll go, okay, cool. This is something that actually we can highlight this in the wallet, so we can update a new version of the wallet that sort of embraces that as an emergent standard and bring that in there. It's just the fact that we kind of have to take the first cut at it because it's almost like, what is the format of the standard that allows us to deliver this full stack user experience? And I think once we take that first cut, I think the community will have a much better idea about, hey, how to think about the problem in creating new standards.
Yeah. Righty. I'm going to move on to question 2. Question 2 by Captain Charles. I'm trying to visualize the Blueprint catalog UI. What will it look like in day-to-day use? Similar to a GitHub repository or more like a drag and drop web app that exports code for you?
Yeah, I'd kind of like to take a first shot at this one. This has come up a few times that I've answered it for a few people, but it's like, it is, I understand where people come back to this. So there's a little bit, the question is specifically a Blueprint catalog UI. And I do want to make sort of clear to people that the Blueprint catalog concept is basically already out. So like even the PTE environment that we've got, and then when we go to alphanet and betanet and so forth, basically the Blueprint catalog idea is the fact that the ledger itself, the network itself, holds a repository of code that can be reused. And so it's inherent in the Blueprint concept, the idea that all smart contracts code starts out as deploying a blueprint to the network, and then you can instantiate that blueprint into a functional component. So the PTE already has a Blueprint catalog that's out there, and you can see all the different components that were instantiated from a given blueprint. And so this functions as a catalog. I kind of think of the catalog as not exactly the same thing, but it's kind of like an on-ledger GitHub. It's like there's this thing out here. It doesn't have versioning yet, obviously, but this is something we want to do done in the future. So the question then about UI is a separate one entirely, because it's kind of like, if you imagine it like, the Explorer or a validator list dashboard or something like this, it's a way of visualizing and making accessible information that's coming from the ledger. So an Explorer dashboard connects to the network, pulls data, and then presents it in a nice way. And there are, unlimited number of ways you can do that. We've got an Explorer. The community has some Explorers that do things in a different way, that present information in a nice way. It's exactly the same thing for the Blueprint catalog. In fact, there also, I think Rock Howard asked the last question. I think he's mentioned that he has some interest in maybe even building some sort of UI to the Blueprint catalog. I would love to see there being multiple community projects that were building Blueprint catalog UIs that were doing cool things like, this one really focuses on reputation. It's like highlighting lots of data about how much this blueprint is being used and connections between blueprints. And maybe it's sort of, like qualifying developers, and they have some standards around that. Like there are a bunch of different ways you can highlight blueprints and filter them and make them searchable and so forth. I would actually prefer that be a community thing. And I've said this before in Discord. We honestly don't have plans. We're not going to be launching a UI for this at Babylon launch. We're not going to be doing it because I kind of want to encourage the community to come in and do this in very specific targeted ways. Now, that said, if that doesn't happen, well, we might do it? We might do something. It's like if we feel like there's a need to be filled here, we're always willing to step up and try to fill a need. But this is one that I think the community will fill better than we will. And I'd like to see that happen.
Yeah, I don't.
And they'll have all the information. I mean, the cool thing is you have so much information to work with that you can, there's no right way of doing a blueprint catalog UI.
I don't think, this is exactly what I was going to say. There's not one right UI for this. There's probably many right UIs and there's going to be many experiments. I think there's also a huge opportunity to bring together sort of disparate data sources as well, where you can say, here's the catalog and here's the audit report. And then here's some statistics, as you say, about what the use of that particular component on Ledger. You could also have alerts around catalogs where people have discovered things, and so there's lots of, and then you're probably going to want catalogs that are going to be geared around beginners and people who want to get started. You'll have other catalogs that will be geared around people who are specifically looking at NFT and gaming. There'll be other ones looking specifically at subsections within decentralized finance or the finance industry. And so it's quite likely that curation's going to be a big job here. And curation's going to be the key that sets these catalogs apart in terms of how people
I think
choose.
That's something which is really interesting from any other industry at the moment as well, is that curation as a function in even Web 2 is becoming something that is increasingly desired now. So if anyone who's familiar with something like Steam, the game store as an example, influencers have their own curated store and you might value someone's opinion on something. So using your audit example, Piers, I could imagine that in the future, say an audit company may have their own catalog of these are all of the these are all the blueprints that we have audited. And that we're sticking a badge of a tick on from that. And some people may value that, some people may value new ones, or as you said, different specialities.
I think this is even part of the answer to the question.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Matt, if you go back 5 years-ish, one of the big areas of exploration in terms of crypto native business models was token curated registries and how to use token economics to elevate. And I think not only are there registries and for marketing or whatever, I think there's business opportunities out there for people to think about how to leverage that. So sorry to jump in there.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's a good point. I think it's also a kind of the answer to the question a lot of people have about the royalty system, about what about this issue of someone can just take my code and redeploy it at a lower royalty price? Well, these sorts of community-driven efforts are the real solution to that. It's if you get a bunch of developers that get together and go, hey, we think we are all developers that are working towards the benefit of the Radix network. We're working together. We're leveraging each other's code. We're doing the right stuff. And there's somebody that comes in and goes, hey, I'm just going to steal your code and I'm going to redeploy it at a lower royalty price. Well, now your explorer can be hey, we're going to highlight these are components that are being deployed by copycats. You should stay away from these because they're not actually the original creators. They're not supporting these things like we do. They don't understand how they work. So having that be community driven is the right solution.
Yeah, and if you think about GitHub as a catalog UI, it's not really a catalog UI. GitHub is designed as a if you're on GitHub, you normally know where you're going to. You've followed a link and that's where you are, rather than going onto GitHub and being I want to find some libraries for this. That's not what GitHub is for. GitHub is the place in which the code lives, and it makes it easy to reference and source, and then you can download it into your IDE and all this kind of stuff. But really, it isn't a catalog UI, and that happens already by curation in other places, and people have recommended library sets that they say, and all this kind of stuff. And GitHub is the ultimate repo, so you can think of it as a GitHub repo on Ledger. That is the right way of thinking about it. But then you have to then think about, well, then what is the way in which you discover what it is that you need in that catalog, in that GitHub repo. And it's probably going to look very similar to how people find things in Web 2 at the moment for the libraries that they want to build with. with. But I think that there's going to be a lot more of a business model based around that because of this ability to generate royalties associated with use of catalogs. And so there's a revenue model associated with driving traffic to catalogs, to components that drive revenue back to the creator. And so I think that there's going to be some really interesting business opportunities here and a lot of things that people create.
I think competition as well is really important, because having a singular UI or a singular way of sorting that is always open to being gamed as well in ways that you can't necessarily predict. So that's why if you look at anytime, say, like the YouTube algorithm changes, there's some people who say, this was a great change. I love it that I'm seeing more random things or more things the same as what I watched in the last 5 days. You get other people going, hey, I looked for how to fix a sink. That doesn't mean I'm a sink fixing enthusiast, and that's all I want to see on YouTube now. There isn't a perfect solution, especially as you get large data sets. And maybe I have fixed a sink recently, which is why that's top of mind.
And I am a sink fixing enthusiast, so I like those recommendations myself.
All right. So next question is a question by JC. Please talk about any current future efforts or rough timelines on bringing a USD denominated, adequately backed, non-algorithmic stablecoin to the Radix network natively. It's a mouthful. Shall we?
5 points for pronunciation there, Piers.
Yeah, it was a tongue twister.
Adam, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, having stablecoins are an essential part of a DeFi ecosystem. They are incredibly powerful, incredibly useful, and having a asset-backed stablecoin is something we are definitely looking at. And there's different variants of them. So as in the question, there's native stablecoins, there's wrapped versions of stablecoins as well, and these are all things that we are exploring at the moment. There's nothing that we can reveal right now, or any commitments. We will make any such thing public as soon as we are able to. But it is something that we know is intrinsically very, very important, especially in the early stages of an ecosystem, to have something in place.
Yeah. I would say categorically, though, you aren't going to see native USDC or native USDT issued on Radix at Babylon. Like, that just doesn't happen, generally speaking, at the start of ecosystems, because it takes a bit of time for those ecosystems to establish to a level that people are like, okay, cool, there's enough usage here. But I think that sort of good bridging solutions, good wrapped asset solutions are going to be great starting points for this. And then as the ecosystem grows and matures, then you will see more natively issued stablecoins. And it may be that some tier 2 or tier 3 stablecoins will issue on top of Radix natively right at the start. But again, like this is all to be revealed later.
Just to clarify, when you said not on Babylon, we mean not at Babylon launch date. It certainly could occur prior to
absolutely
Xi'an
on
ship
Babylon.
Date. Just so nobody misinterprets that.
Yeah. Not on, like, this is the thing, is we keep talking about this, and I just want to keep pushing it forwards, is that Babylon go live is not and should not be a big bang event. Like, don't think about this as a big bang event, because when you launch a new set of technologies, even if they have been really well tested, which they will have been, during BetaNet and on the run up to Babylon, the day that Babylon goes live, it is a new network going live, and it takes a bit of time to just make sure that everything's, working correctly. And so if, day one Babylon goes live, there isn't like hundreds of millions of dollars flowing across to Radix. That's not a failure. Like, Babylon going live successfully and all of the addresses being transitioned successfully and all of the staking being transitioned successfully and all of the nodes being transitioned successfully and Scrypto working successfully and all of the execution environment working successfully, that's huge on its own. And you don't want to like front load it with a bunch of other stuff as well. So like, Babylon is a huge milestone, but it don't think of it as a big bang, because it really needs to be a careful rollout of things so that you have some, sort of like maturing time for the network as well. Okay. Question 4 by Taco Bell. It'd be great to get a view on Radix's real competitors, TradFi with all their muscular access to the real world assets who are creating their own DLT infrastructure. Jeremy, do you have a view on this?
I actually do. Yo quiero Taco Bell. I reject the premise of the question. I don't think TradFi is actually our real competitors. I think TradFi is going to be our natural partners. And part of the reason why Radix has taken a deliberate, intentional approach to taking care of compliance, dotting our I's, crossing our T's, making sure all the regulatory muscles, enabling badges and all that things is because the TradFi world is going to leverage the innovation that happens on a public decentralized ledger. The idea that they're building their own DLT infrastructure, that's like saying to me, hey, you guys are building the internet, but watch out for all the people building corporate intranets. Like,
right.
It's like two different planets. Yes, they will do a better job of, they will lower their costs and a lot of the hassle associated with their current existing business model, but they have no capability to build entirely new business models, which is what we will see on Radix. And so in order to access the public Radix-based lending, borrowing, collateral, derivatives, futures, blah, blah, blah markets, they're going to need to interface and access that pool of capital, which they will do through Instabridge, Instapass, and Instabridge, and they'll come on. And so I think like they will exist side by side. I don't think they are our competitors. I think they're going to be thanking their lucky stars that Radix has done everything right from the beginning.
I'm going to have to jump in here to represent the question because I think I know why they're asking this question. It's because I have said that TradFi is our natural competitor before. So we'll have to turn this into a debate. We actually agree, Jared, but I think there's a different way of looking. Like when you're talking about TradFi is not sort of this single monolithic thing. So I think there's another way of looking at it, which is in terms of the thing I've said before, which I'll repeat again, is that, in terms of our competitors, for what benchmark are we setting for what we do? Is we're measuring ourselves against TradFi, because if we can't reach the same levels of functionality and usability and ease and all these sorts of things and liquidity and everything else associated with TradFi, we can't reach that level, then mainstream is not going to move to DeFi. This is going to stick with TradFi because no one likes taking, it's more decentralized, but everything else about it sucks. Like, it's not how it works. So we always benchmark against TradFi rather than benchmarking against, Solana or Avalanche or whatever, because we don't think they're shooting far enough ahead. So that's partially why I have said that the TradFi is our natural competitors in that context. However, I think there's also this interesting point. I think something else I want to add here was that, I think if TradFi is looking at it in the right way, you're right, that it's like they should find a position in this. And we're trying to find ways of saying like, hey guys, you might want to consider finding your place in these public networks because this is the future. This is where it's going to go. And hey, you've got some things you can add that's of value here. That said, I'll say that, this is not our primary strategy, to be honest. Like, this is not sort of like, all right, we got to convince a bunch of banks and everything to integrate to Radix, because from what we've always seen, like, Russ and I saw quite a bit of this up close when we were dealing with TradFi. It's like, they don't innovate. Like, they want to be able to talk about the fact, oh yeah, we're into blockchain and this is super exciting for us or whatever, but they don't innovate. What they do is their whole model is they buy out the competitor. Well, you can't buy out a decentralized network. They don't realize that yet. They figure, we'll check the box, we'll tear our shoulders. Oh yeah, we know blockchain's no problem. We got this handled. And then we'll get a few years down the road and they'll find out that their lunch is getting eaten by DeFi. And then they go, oh great. At the last possible minute, they'll figure out a way of, integrating and try to remake the business model. Now, the smart guys won't wait that long. I think it's going to be kind of the smaller outfits. It's going to be the people that are like the more agile people in the TradFi space who are like, hey, you know what? There's actually like really interesting, there are different market dynamics here and different ways of managing liquidity and stuff in DeFi that we don't get in TradFi today. We're going to kind of extend our business model in that direction. But in terms of like big TradFi, they're not going to move until the last minute. We don't care. That's fine. We're going to, our developers are going to outmaneuver them and obsolete them. This is why our whole mission statement is to obsolete traditional fi.
And that's been seen as well historically when you look at things like fintech, even something as big as like mobile app banking. Mm-hmm. Like at least in the UK, I'm sure someone will correct me, somewhere in the world maybe this wasn't the case, but like in the UK, it wasn't the big name banks that came out first with mobile apps. it was challenger banks, it was fintech startups going, hey, we've got this cool innovation on like, we think banking from the phone would be a good idea, and using an app. And when that caught on and it started really providing end users big benefits, and there was a demand for it, very, very quickly, big banks started trying to utilize that technology in the same way. And I think that pattern will follow with DeFi. Is you'll find there'll be some challenger fintechs who are like, hey, we can do some stuff that looks similar-ish to what TradFi is today, but utilizes some of DeFi to give a unique benefit to our end users. And if they are, and not even if, when they are successful in whatever form they are, then you'll see that pick up momentum and you'll get adoption. And just in the same way as user adoption starts with innovators, then early adopters and majority, etc., I think you see the same in businesses. And you see that in any technological kind of innovation space, is you get some people innovating early when it's a bit rough around the edges, and some are very late to the party.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're that far off. And, God help me if I ever get into a debate with Matt, because I'm going to lose, and I would never want to do that. You just got to know your own boundaries. That's what I've learned. But
I disagree. I think you could win an argument with me.
See, I've already lost. I think you're right. Like, I totally agree. Like, TradFi is not going to show up on day one. They're not going to show up on day 100. Maybe by day 1,000. Like, yeah, they'll get there. I definitely also agree with that, and that it'll be more the tier 2, tier 3 TradFi people who'll be like, okay, here's a way for me to get a competitive advantage. And maybe it's just a semantics thing where it's like, is it competitors? Sure. I almost hear like you say it's about comparables. It's like if you're selling your house, your competitors is everyone else selling their house, but you're also looking for comparables for who's selling what. So it's like, yes, we don't want to benchmark ourselves. Our comparable sort of like how we judge our success is, look how much TVL there is in DeFi. Oh, there's 35 billion. Like, that's not what we're shooting for. Like, that's what I don't want to say we're shooting for on day one after Pierce's thing, but that's what we're shooting for early on. Like, we're thinking much, much bigger than that. We're thinking, like, what?
Day 5.
Yeah, day 5. Exactly. I mean, and that'll be a weekend.
Guaranteed.
Just to show
30
off.
billion. I just heard it.
Exactly.
30 billion on day 5.
We'll wake up on Tuesday morning and be like, wow, there's $300 billion of TVL. That's fantastic. And yeah, so it's like, you're right. I think like, we have always said, and one of the things that I think is so awesome about Radix is we started from that point of 400 trillion and worked backwards. So for us, it's not 400 trillion or bust. I mean, I think we'd be happy with like 380 trillion, but like those are the numbers we're thinking about. So, DeFi today, as Russ and I were talking today, it's yesterday's demo DeFi. This is great. Let's get to like real DeFi or delightful DeFi. We're still playing around with that one, Russ. But yeah, I think we're all on the same page. But comparables, maybe not competitors, but I hear what you're saying too, because I yield to whatever point Matt's making for my own sanity.
I think just sort of to close it out, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to say a set of competitors when a technology is so groundbreaking. Like it's like saying when the telephone was created, what was a competitor? Kind of telegraph, yeah, sure, but like it was a very different thing. Like, what was the competitor to the internet? Was it post? Like, it's just like it just changes what's possible. And so some firms that relied on their business model and what existed before will adapt and use it, and some will die because new companies that were born native in that environment were better and created a better service that did the same thing that users wanted of the previous service, but now we're able to create better, faster, cheaper via the new service. Moving on to the next question, which is, have you thought, it's by Fondor, have you thought about acceptable refusable payments, referring to the latest Tornado Cash Dust payment to crypto celebs? After receiving the payment, some of them got blocked out of the DeFi system. Matt, have you ever heard this question before?
Yeah, it's because you posed this question to me a while ago. It's this is one of these great use cases. This is my opportunity. It's called to repeat our whole call for use cases. We love use cases, and this is a really interesting one. We have this brand new use case. We suddenly realize, oh my God, there's this reason why I need to be able to sort of prevent payments from people, because there's this a risk of getting on the blacklist if you touch a radioactive account. So we've thought about it. It's technically feasible for sure. I mean, there are some technical mechanisms that we have to work with in terms of how the accounts work that allows you to set up some some block lists and allow lists and stuff like this. But it is a pretty subtle thing. I mean, it's kind of a new thing about, like, this is what Piers and I were talking about, like, who is it that's responsible for creating this list? Like, you don't want to set up a situation where you're locking everything down. We're going, okay, I'm only accepting deposits from these few people that I know, because that's a usability nightmare. Like, an open network has this, by nature, you have this idea of kind of, easy, free motion of assets. So it kind of gets to, like, it's a use case that requires more thought, because I think we need to get very specific about why we want to do it and what specific thing we're trying to solve. I think there's some interesting things that can be done there in terms of, like, components that would sort of maintain a list of radioactive accounts, which maybe you kind of subscribe to, and this would give you the ability of doing some of this filtering. But honestly, it's actually a use case that we haven't really fully figured out yet. Like, there's no, like, easy switch on Radix, because it's like I would say that the brute force solution to this compromises the whole network design. Like, this is one of these use cases that's kind of like fighting the nature of decentralized networks. So, it might be that the regulation needs to catch up to this a little bit as well. I mean, we realize, like, it's pretty stupid to just blacklist accounts because they receive tokens when they literally couldn't do anything about it. You're not actually helping anyone. You're not solving the problem. So I expect that, like, we don't need to solve it in the same way, because that solution is a stupid one.
Potentially.
I think the world has some maturing to do in that space of just understanding, like, hey, in public ledgers, stuff can get sent to you. And even if you say moved it on, it's like indelible ink that it happened.
It's also true in the banking system, though. Like that, what we're describing is also true in the banking system, and the regulation applies in the way that you would they're trying to apply it in crypto. As in, if you receive blacklisted funds or stolen funds, your account is flagged and you are questioned. Like, the bank is expected to ask you questions at that point. And they're going to be pretty pointed questions, because, like, why would anyone send you funds unless you had some connection? Which is what's so interesting about this Tornado Cash dust attack, where people are basically spamming addresses that they can identify because people have got .eth domain names, and then so they can just send people .eth, and so they're spam attacking from those on the basis of the fact that Tornado Cash has been sanctioned, and any wallets that interact with it, including receiving.
But this points out the differences, because you basically can't execute that spam attack in the traditional system. Like, yes, technically I can send money to people, but it is impractical for me to spam a large number of bank accounts right now, because you have this centralized system that kind of it puts friction on the whole thing. Like, any transaction from bank to bank is kind of this laborious thing that has to go through the system. Yeah. And once you have a system where it's like, it's a direct thing that anyone can do with a signature, it's like kind of the nature of the regulation might want to change. But if it doesn't, there are mechanisms we can use to solve this too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's an interesting thing here, which is that which is not immediately obvious, but the difference in difficulty between restricting where where a wallet can send to, and restricting where a wallet can receive from, are like massively different levels of complexity difference, right? So like it's easy to go, okay, this account can only send to these addresses, which you might want to do, right? You go, we're going to restrict this to only interact with, dexes, and it can only send to these dex addresses. Like you would in your own trading account, to create greater security around where funds can flow. But restricting where you can receive from is really difficult, and it gets even more difficult when you start thinking about sharded networks as well. So we have discussed, like, simple answer, yes, we have definitely discussed this, and it's an interesting use case, and we should be thinking about it more. Definitely not anything that is in scope for Babylon launch, in terms of being able to refuse payments from specific addresses.
Just for Babylon launch, we might. It's possible we would allow you to say, like, look, there's an allow list of, like, I only accept the following resources, the only following tokens. We might implement that, and you could opt into it, but it would not be the default, where it's, the default will be your account is receive any asset.
And it also doesn't really solve this problem of the Tornado Cash thing, where it's like, there's nothing wrong with the asset. It's wrong with the source. And the problem is defining source is actually a really tricky thing.
There are other workarounds here as well. It's not that this is not possible, but
Right.
we shall have a ponder. Number 6, question from Radix Max. I can't read. Any new Scrypto drops before alphanet? Can you summarize feedback from devs outside of Radix? What do they like and or what are they requesting? Russell.
Sick drops.
What's that? Sick drops coming. There will be no more Scrypto drops before alpha. I mean, we're within a month of alphanet releasing, so Scrypto 0.5 is what will be run on alphanet once the network goes live. Feedback, I mean, overwhelmingly the feedback is great. Can't wait for production. I like implementing stuff in Scrypto. We certainly have. I can't remember who I.
Oh, you've muted.
Oops, I accidentally hit my space bar and muted myself. I was saying I can't remember who I said this to previously, but one of the really heartening signs I'm getting is the feedback around Scrypto when people are saying, I want this, is usually something quite small, which shows we've done a very nice job of we're meeting the main use cases and everything. And a lot of times they prefer that their style of coding be embraced by Scrypto rather than, I can't do what I want in Scrypto. I just prefer it was achieved this other way. So I think the one that's consistently on feedback is a lot of people are coming to, hey, I'm now building real stuff. I want a better testing experience than we have right now. We've heard this. We are going to look to improve it. I can guarantee that on Babylon day 1, we won't have whatever the ultimate form of the Scrypto testing experience is. We hear you that people say, like, I want better tools for doing testing of my app. We will do as much as we can by Babylon, and this will be an ongoing process. And then there's a couple of, I'd say, kind of code. It's more like kind of code style things that we have some long running debates on how to handle things like typed buckets and the like that we're paying attention to, and we have some notional solutions to. But yeah, I think the overall feedback is please ship it as soon as possible, right? Which is just what you want to hear. Like, I can go achieve what I want to do. Let me release my app.
On the feedback one as well, like shameless plug for our social channels. But if you follow our Twitter regularly, you will see countless bits of feedback that we get. If you go into the Scrypto channels, you will see countless bits of feedback from people using Scrypto and building on it, and DevSwarm events, etc. Like, we have got a mountain of really good feedback of people building on Scrypto. And that continues to grow. And so also I'd say the other way, if you are someone building on Scrypto and you do have feedback, please keep giving it. It is the number of times that I have spoken to potential partners or other applications or people in the space, and they're like, what's the feedback to Scrypto, or how's it going down? I was like, go and look in the channels. Just go and ask there. Go and make an anon account and go and join and be like, hey, what do you think of Scrypto? Let the community answer. Don't hear it from us. And that goes down really well. So please answer those questions.
I feel like
even better, just go build something. Go build a simple thing, and you'll see how easy it is and how helpful people are. And it's not just people who work for RDX Works that are going, oh yeah, just do this, and they go to, like, it's a tremendously great dev community already.
I feel like we should take all of the quotes and responses we've gotten from devs and turn it into like a Star Wars style title scroll, where it's just like it
just goes up the endlessly.
The quotes just
That's a money idea, Jeremy.
That would be awesome. I want that, and it's updated every couple of weeks.
Yeah,
I'm just saying we quite often at events have a video wall that you could put something like that on.
Yeah, there you go.
And just has little speakers next to it that goes. I think that's how it goes. Jesus. Okay.
Go quit your day job.
Was that meant to be the Star Wars theme?
The Star Wars theme with the star.
We all knew what it was. Come on, you don't need to beat him up over here humming.
All right. So next question from Florian. What is the expected schedule to fix all of the current obstacles, growth, awareness of Radix? So we have 6 points here. Number 1, get exchanges like KuCoin to list XRD instead of EXRD with a bridge from EXRD to XRD. KuCoin's obviously a well-ranked exchange, so good thing to have. Currently only trades EXRD. 2, fixing CoinMarketCap.com rankings. This is very long overdue. We've been ranking sort of in CoinGecko, but CoinMarketCap still hasn't ranked us properly. 3, have XRD on top exchanges like Coinbase or Binance after volume is better. Number 4, increasing the volume, market making arbitrage, more exchange, but more importantly, more users buying in. The current volume is ridiculous for a project of the scope of Radix. Number 5, more retail-focused marketing. Developers need a user base to build for. And number 6, projects not only consists of developers, but also of founder types, people with a vision. DApp accelerator programs with grants helping developers and founders to bootstrap. So I'm going to break these into quick fires from different people. So Adam, number 1, getting exchanges like KuCoin to list XRD instead of EXRD. What's happening there?
So KuCoin specifically have already confirmed, as we put in Telegram a couple of days ago, that they are integrating XRD. We don't have an exact date that will be going live, but as soon as we do, we'll share that. There are also, I can't name them, but there are multiple other exchanges also in the later stages of integrating XRD. And this is something that we're always pushing for across the board at multiple different kind of tiers of exchanges.
Yep. Multiple top 20 exchanges coming. Number 2, fixing coinmarketcap.com ranking. This is long overdue now. Adam, again.
Cool. So as I did a long update in Telegram about this, we have been back and forth with them. And basically every time we contact them about this, we're given their general answer of what their ranking factors are to get verified. As of right now, as some of you may have seen, the supply on CoinMarketCap is different to CoinGecko because, of course, CoinGecko accepted our API and verified our supply. We've changed it based on another interpretation of CoinMarketCap's requirements. They accepted that, but still didn't verify it. And every time we ask them why we're not verified, they just give us the whole list again that as far as we can see, we're meeting all their requirements. So yeah, we are continually going back to them to ask, but we just keep getting the same response.
Very frustrating, but adding more exchanges, at some point it will happen, but not when we expected it to. But be rest assured that we are continually contact them. We understand that this is an issue.
And just one other important point on there is I've seen many people ask like, well, don't go through their main form or don't like go through side channels or back channels and stuff like that. Every time we have done that, we are told very clearly that they will only make changes through the official channel. And it's actually on their main knowledge base and stuff that contacting them through other forms is, if anything, going to hinder it. And that, again, is something that you see with exchanges and things like that as well, is they are very careful to make sure to firewall, for lack of a better term, the team in charge of these very important things like verifying supply away from back channels to make it a more legitimate process.
Okay. 3, have XRD on top exchanges like Coinbase or Binance. Adam, again.
Yes, we are always working at that. As a following question will come up, volume and other exchanges and other factors all feed into that, as well as the maturity of the ecosystem, the stage of the project and things like that. And especially on the larger exchanges, the process for doing that is a lot more firewalled to make sure that it's impartial and is done on their side in a fair and balanced way. But we're always pushing for it.
So number 4, increasing the volume of the traded volume of the token. This is something that Radix Tokens Jersey has been working very closely with market makers on. Radix Tokens Jersey has already engaged a couple of top market makers. So people like Wintermute and Oros. We have been working with them on strategies of increasing liquidity and depth around spot. We've also are working with a couple of other market makers that we're bringing online, plus market makers to be focusing on the lower tier exchanges that have also listed us to increase the possibility of like arbitrage between exchanges based on depth. There's also available on smaller exchanges. What's really interesting about the whole market making industry is that it's very fractured. So, there are market makers who will only do a few exchanges, but they're sort of very reputable for those exchanges. And then other market makers that will do a lot more, but they're not able to sort of build the same kind of volume or liquidity base on those exchanges. It's quite frankly a bewildering system, and we have been looking at this for a very long time and working with partners, and this is something that we continue to work on. I think that the there's not really much more to say on this apart from that we know it's a problem and we're working on it, and Radix Tokens Jersey is taking an active role in this. But as we get more exchanges, as we get more liquidity, as we get more visibility, all of these things should lead to each other. Number 5, more retail-focused marketing. Developers need a user base to build for. So 5, Jeremy.
I mean, once Adam gets his job done, I'd be happy to start. No, just kidding. Yeah, I mean, first of all, we've seen a 52% growth since the beginning of the year in the number of wallets that have more than 2,000 XRD in them already. So that's been positive. And if you've noticed, I know you've been paying attention, Florian, as you always do. But over the past month, we've really ramped up our PR game. We had 18 PR hits in the last, now we've had 21 PR hits in the last 2.5 weeks. And things have really been picking up. And I think our story is getting tighter. As you know, for Q2, we really spent a lot of time focusing on developers, working closely with the developer team and the product team on that. And we've been turning our focus more towards retail and token holders. Obviously, it's a bear market, so not the easiest environment, but it's not lost on us that we need to focus there, get our story out. And I think between the 2 events that we have at the end of this month, end of September, Token 2049 and Masari, as well as some other activities that we're doing, you'll see that pick up. And especially as we move into the end of Q3 and Q4, we have some decent plans in the works. And if we when we execute against them, I expect it to generate a lot of attention, and hopefully we can convert a lot of those people into members or active staking members of our community.
Yeah, I'd say that the play to a retail base is always an interesting one, especially as if the network itself doesn't have things that people can do, you're going to be constantly working against a bigger background noise of things that are being launched on other ecosystems. Obviously, that changes markedly when we get to Babylon. And again, it's really important to note that Babylon, as I said before, isn't a big bang event. Like this is when you can start launching DeFi applications and start building user bases and stuff like that. But like it's the first time that people are going to be using sort of the full production wallet. It's the first time that people are going to be using the dApps in the way that you use dApps on top of Radix. And so there's always going to be a bit of a build up there. And so we are going to make sure that we're building as much sort of visibility around Radix up to the sort of the launches of these key milestones. But do make sure that you're keeping aware of where the cycle is going to be, and look at similar ecosystems like the launch of Avalanche or the launch of Solana or launch of any of these. It wasn't at launch that millions of people came across, or thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people came across. It was very much an early start, lots of people trying things out, and as it got proven out and the excitement built it, and then you started to really get the audience coming in.
I think there's one other thing, that I just wanted to add on, which is what we're doing now to sort of build off of what you were saying. As we all know, quote unquote, getting Radix is not necessarily the most intuitive thing. So we are putting together a process we call the journey to revelation, which is to understand where people are in their relative knowledge about blockchain, crypto, DeFi, and then understand what the levers are that we can pull in order to help accelerate people along that path to get to the revelation. And I know that as we optimize that experience and we understand where the acceleration points are and we get better at it, we will be able to more programmatically take people from, oh, I've heard of Radix or I've heard of DeFi, to, oh my gosh, like it clicked. I was reading this phenomenal book the other day, and he was talking about sort of the culture of crypto. and what people in crypto share and what they don't share. And he said that one thing that everybody who's in crypto shares is they all remember the moment where like blockchain clicked for them, where they just got it. And I think that that's also true of people who get Radix. They all remember their personal moment of Radix revelation. And I think what we can do is, instead of just sort of hoping people come about it on their own, we can help, almost like Radix Sherpas, guide them along the way. So, we're putting that infrastructure in place right now with the idea that we can refine it as we get closer to BetaNet and Babylon, so that as more people hear about it as a result of the token holder focused activities we're doing, we have a higher than, or an improving average in terms of the number of people who experience the revelation.
You're muted, Piers.
Piers, you're mute.
Piers.
We're just coming to the half past the hour on our time, which I know that Matt has got to leave us. So thank you very much, Matt. We will we will see you next time, and I think we'll just finish out on question 6 here, which is projects not only consist of developers but also founder type people with visions. DApp accelerators and with DApp ecosystems accelerate with grants, helping developers and founders to bootstrap. So, do we have grant plans, Russell?
We do. I will answer for Matt in his absence, as this is doubly an area he addresses. But we will have an announcement on how developer incentives are going to work in this December. I will remind you all that if you've never seen Matt's description of how many platforms target the flash mob rather than the movement, that our developer incentive program is not something so simple as here's a pile of money and come apply for a grant and that's it. And we're just paying people who don't necessarily want to be here is not the way that we want to do this. We want to have people who think of it more of as we want to be nurturing greater than just, oh, hey, there's free money to be gotten here. I'll go learn whatever this Radix thing is, make some money and leave. That's exactly the projects we're trying to avoid. So rest assured that if you are building right now and you're talking in channels and so forth, and we see that you are a community member who is trying to do real things here, that sort of thing counts for a lot. So don't feel like your time spent right now ahead of any grant program is something where it's like, well, then all the name brand projects came in and I was left with nothing because I was just this individual. We very much want to empower the community and not just look for mercenaries who are just hunting for a year's payday and then depart.
Right. I think there's a wider thing here as well, which is really important to note, which is that crypto has never really experienced a long period of sort of more constrained market conditions. One of the things that is critical for any company when it builds is it should build itself to be as resilient as possible. This means that companies that tend to keep their cost base low and tend to focus on sort of MVP builds that tend to focus on customer are the ones that really succeed in the traditional space. And even in Silicon Valley, even in Y Combinator, when you're there, they aren't talking about, go raise hundreds of millions of dollars. They're like, focus on what really matters. Keep your cost base down until you have product market fit. And only once you have product market fit, really double down on on your growth plans then. And crypto has a lot to learn in that area. I think that, don't expect these grants programs to be huge amounts of money, because they're not going to be. Like the point here is about creating enough of a scope for people to be able to carry on focusing on what they need to do to get product market fit and to get things to market. And that's exactly what we're going to be thinking about when we put these out. And it feels painful in the short term, because it feels like you can just, in crypto a lot, I see people just talk about throwing money at a problem, and throwing a money problem doesn't work as well as you think it does.
It actually works worse. As you know, Piers, I have like a little side sort of passion project that I'm playing around with now. I guess I'll give it away because only the Radix believers are watching it. I call it RONI, which is return on network investment. And we've started to look at the ecosystem funds. We're in the very early stages, but we've started to look at the ecosystem funds for other layer ones, how much money they've raised, how many projects they've funded, the average amount of money that they put into those projects, and then what kind of return they're getting, whether it's in terms of TVL or even better, users, number of users who come to the network, and how many people have only that one token versus become, token holders of multiple dApps on that network. And the data, and again, super early, so we're not talking anything ready, but like, it's pretty sad. Like,
Right.
There's no accountability. The money's being thrown around. Mostly, there's no like discipline to this. I mean, you have sort of people who are playing VCs, but they don't have the discipline of like world-class VCs to do the deal. They're just like, hey, and I mean, I've heard some absolute horror stories also in terms of how projects get funded that are just, just reminiscent of like the worst of, .com and crypto ICO heydays of how people get funded. And there's no accountability, because when you have that much money, it's like, oh, I just got to get rid of it. And then you're just throwing it away. So,
right.
Anyway, that's...
And just to be clear, that is also something I've heard echoed from existing projects who have received grants and and are now successful within like the DeFi and Web3 ecosystem, is they have views on how existing and historic grants programs have not been beneficial even for them as success cases out of that. Right. And I think one way I always look at this is throwing money at a problem is like an accelerant. And that's great if you know that what you're accelerating is the right thing. But equally, if you're accelerating the wrong thing, you're just going to get negative results far quicker, which can be problematic.
Right. So we are thinking about this. This is definitely going to be launched. You will hear more details around it in December. So rest assured these things are coming. But I think there's some important sort of points here as well. So I think that's everything for the roundtable for today. Thank you very much for Adam, Jeremy, Russell, for you coming, and thank you for Matt in his absence. Do keep these questions coming, and we will be back again in around a month to be doing this for all of you lovely people. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your September, and we'll see you all soon.
Oh, Piers, we haven't done the Easter egg for people who watched to this point. What's the favorite plant behind Piers's face right now? Like, what should we add to the shelf?
You want a new one? You want to vote for a new one?
I want a new one.
Yeah.
I've lost
Piers needs something new.
Two. I lost my succulent and I lost my bonsai tree, both of which didn't
my
survive.
Bonsai tree
needs to be a durable plant, a hardy plant that can go without watering for weeks.
Get the ZZ. That's what I have.
He said he lost his succulent though. Let's see.
I have a cactus. I do have a cactus. There it is.
We'll send you some California plants. No problem. They don't even need soil to grow.
California.
All right, guys. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.
Bye.